Well, a spray meant to deter bears in the wild is being used as a weapon in public places all over Saskatchewan, and police say it is getting worse. It's been sprayed at public pools, schools, and major events like the exhibition in the summer.
Bear mace is like a big problem in this city. I know people who have it. I don't support it, but I know people who have it.
So today we take a closer look at bear spray, who is carrying it and why. And if you have a story, maybe you were at one of the exhibitions when bear mace was sprayed, or at the mall or at a school, you can call us at 1-800-716-2221 or email bluesky@cbc.ca. So the spray is meant to deter bears. Hunters carry it, or you might take it with you when you go hiking or camping. It contains capsaicin, which is a chemical found in plants such as chilies. The canisters are pretty large, and when you spray, the chemical can reach about 12 meters. And when it touches the skin and eyes, it burns. Today we're going to try and find out why we're seeing it used so often. It's a pretty gritty topic, and so you might hear some gritty language.
What have you noticed?
So I'm on social media, and it's like almost every other day where I see some sort of incident like this.
What about just as a young person being out and about? Are you ever afraid that you're going to get bear maced?
Yeah, it's a possibility, especially when a lot of people my age carry it around, like, so commonly.
How common is it for young people to be carrying bear mace?
I personally know a lot of people that carry it, and I can tell when someone's carrying one. So.
And the people that you know that carry it, why do they carry it?
I guess they're trying to act hard or tough or something like that.
And is it for protection or is it for intimidation?
It's not for protection, because why would you need bear mace to protect yourself? So I feel like people are trying to use it for intimidation.
What do you think people don't understand about it?
I feel like when people like spray something that's meant for like big predators, they don't see how it affects other people around the area, or how it can affect like the person itself. So that makes me question why people even carry it around.
Bear mace turns up at a lot of public places. Last summer, it shut down the opening day at the new pool in Wascana Park in Regina. A joyful afternoon quickly turned disorderly. People took videos and posted them on social media.
The kids, it's a public place. Everybody saw them and what they did, and they bear maced the pool. It sprayed everywhere. All of the people are cleared the pool. We can't even get out of the place because of all of the ways that it's blocked.
Bear mace has been sprayed in all sorts of places. Shopping malls, the exhibition. It was also sprayed at a huge powwow, where again, people pulled out their phones to capture the chaos.
It got bear maced, the powwow.
Mohammed, we don't know what happened. It could be kids trying to be disruptive. There may have been a fight, or was someone trying to rob someone? Regina police say there were 207 charges related to bear spray being used as a weapon in Regina. That's up from 136 the year before. My colleague Nicole was walking to work the other day when she saw a group of teens waiting for the bus. So she stopped to talk to them about bear spray.
Well, there are a fair amount of people that will just hide it in other containers, like Axe or other body sprays or stuff like that. And it's really a power play. Like, it's not really a fair power play at all. It's meant for bears, and there are a lot of teenagers using it to get their way, to up people's shit, to take possessions, and to just sort of disturbs the peace. And yeah, it's not great, and I'd wish to see less of it in the city.
So where have you seen people having it?
Downtown, the hood, almost everywhere. People probably have mace at the school too in their bags, and we just don't know.
And how are you seeing it being used? Is it something that people are carrying around for protection?
I wouldn't disapprove of it being carried around for protection purposes only, but there are so many people that carry it around just for the purpose of getting free stuff from other people.
Like, what do you mean? What do you mean getting free stuff?
Robbing them. with something as petty as bear mace. And
So you've seen that happen?
yes.
So someone just says, "You give me your stuff, or I'm going to mace you."
Basically, up your shit. Like, clutch something at your waist, up your shit.
Okay, so you're. This is radio, so I can't see what you're doing, but you're like
No,
just
there's something
kind
at
of
your
pretending that
waist,
you have
yeah.
something in your waist and just lifting your shirt a bit so that you can see that you've got something.
Yep. Whether that's a machete, whether that's bear mace, whether that's anything.
And does it change the way you move around in the city? Like, does it change where you go?
100%. I try and avoid downtown. There are a lot of relationships that I've cut off because of stuff like that. Yeah.
Bear mace is like a big problem in this city. I know people who have it. I don't support it, but I know people who have it. And I see it everywhere. I see it in North Central. I see it at any event, like if we go to the exhibition, if we go to any powwows, round dances, any event in Regina, there's bear mace. It's kind of ruined going to events or like things like that. Like it's completely ruined. Like there are times where I'm like scared to go to the exhibition, which is supposed to be a fair of fun, but like people bring mace there, people bring knives there, people bring so many different things there that they're not supposed to, and I don't even know how they're getting it in because we have so much security there because of that. I do think mace is a big problem, and I don't actually know, like people claim to have it for self-defense, but I don't think you need bear mace for self-defense. I've never seen it be used for self-defense. And the kids who use bear mace oftentimes will go up to one individual in groups of threes and go at them, yelling at them, whatever the conflict may be. It could be, I don't know, they're getting jumped or they're getting robbed or whatever it is. And they will attack these unarmed people.
What has been your experience with bear mace?
I've had it pulled on me a couple of times. I've seen people get maced. It happens a lot at festivals.
So you've had it pulled on you?
Yeah.
Like tell me what happened.
Oh, I live in North Central and I was going to school there for a while, and just some kid would chase after me after school and pulled it out on me once. Maybe twice now, but that was last year.
And how did you feel when that happened?
Honestly, a bit scared, but I didn't get maced, so it's not a problem.
Do you know people who have been maced?
Oh yeah, tons of people. There's people at the school who have mace, and it's kind of messed up that 13-year-olds, 14-year-olds can just get a weapon like that.
And so what do you think, like, where are people getting it?
Honestly, I don't know. A lot of adults will buy their kids bear mace because they think it's better than a gun or better than a knife or something, but it's just as bad.
What happens when someone gets maced? Like, what actually happens to them physically?
Oh, it hurts like a bitch. It gets in your eyes, it stings, it gets down your throat. It can get everywhere, and it hurts.
It's like it gets on your hands, and wherever your hands go, it goes. So you rub your eyes, it's in your eyes. Best thing to do, milk and don't touch your face. Just let it sit, get it out of your eyes, and then take a shower.
Have you been sprayed?
Yes.
What was that situation?
It was just at a party with a bunch of drunk people, and then stupid stuff happened. I've also witnessed there was a girl crying outside of my house. Me and my mother went up to her, found out she had been maced. So we helped her out. My mom called the ambulance because she was really concerned. And no ambulances came because it just wasn't considered important enough. So we drove her to the ER.
So these teenagers have clearly seen a lot. But it's not just a Regina thing. Bear spray is used across the province as a weapon, a way to intimidate, and some say as a tool for protection. So Mohammed, you're wondering why people use it. I found someone who used to carry it. Chris Witchikin was a member of a gang when he got his hands on some.
Well, one thing is protection. Why do we carry weapons, right? Guns are too expensive or they can't get their hands on guns, but bear spray is a little bit easier to get your hands on. For me, it was, I just had a friend of a friend that didn't have a criminal record that would go into the store and just say that I'm here to get it from my father. He's going hunting this, and then it was easy. She just showed her ID and it was good.
Chris says he's left that lifestyle behind and is being supported by Straight Up. That's an organization that helps people leave gangs. Chris shared with me that he was sexually assaulted when he was just 7 years old, and he told me that life's been really hard for him. He lives outside of Saskatoon, he's got kids, and is trying to get himself on a better path. When I connected with him on a video call, he sat next to Stan Tulmakoff.
It's a common item that young people as well as adults carry with them.
Stan works for Straight Up. He's supported a ton of youth over the years. A lot are trying to leave gangs, but he also spends time at high schools, so he just gets to know a lot of youth. He says a lot of gang members do carry spray, but so do other youth who have no affiliation with a gang.
The young people that I've worked with are non-gang members. They're carrying it because kind of similar reasons to what Chris mentioned before, protection. They feel in the neighborhood that they're, living in. They feel, walking home at night, they don't feel safe, so they feel like they need to carry something. A slang term that we use is kind of beef meaning conflict with other people. So they feel they need to carry it for that reason. So I guess maybe a common denominator amongst it is it's a sense of security in their own way.
What do you think about that? People feel like they need that as a sense of security. What do you think about that, Chris?
Well, I actually went through it, right? I once did give this guy, probably 22 years old, I gave this other gang member a can of spray, and because he asked me for it, because he's going to be selling drugs. He wanted it obviously for protection because he's selling drugs, and if he ever runs into other people, right, he's gonna for protection pretty much.
Both Chris and Stan have been hit with bear spray, but under totally different circumstances. Here's what happened to Chris.
There was this time when me and my brother were walking to the store in Saskatoon, and it was my older brother, and he's not ganged up, but we ended up going to 7-Eleven. It was nighttime. We were drinking, and we ran into these other guys, and they were other gang rivals, and it was icy out. It was it was kind of his winter out, and it was really icy on the roads. Me and this guy had beef, we had disagreements between each other, right? And I didn't have anything on me. I wasn't carrying anything on me, but this guy pulled out a big can of spray, one of these jumbo cans, because they come in medium, or they can get those jumbo, the bigger ones. And those ones let off a lot of spray. It was crazy because me and my brother were going one-on-one with these guys, and then a guy comes out of the car and he had a big can and he just sprayed us. And that was my first time getting bear sprayed, and I was in the shower for long times just trying to get the pain, but it's just making it worse because of the water, right? Because once you put water on the spray, it doesn't it tends to burn more. It doesn't matter if you're using cold or hot. I couldn't see nothing. I couldn't even see where I was going. My brother had to help me, and yeah, it was a pretty intense experience.
The day Chris told me this story, police sent out a release about an incident in Saskatoon. A 16-year-old female sprayed 3 security guards with bear mace. She was charged with 3 counts of assault with a weapon. Then a few days later, I saw a post on social media about people being sprayed at a liquor store in Saskatoon. We don't know what happened. Was it someone trying to protect themselves, or were they using it to commit a crime, to steal something? What seems pretty evident, though, is that this is happening a lot, and we're trying to figure out why bear spray is used so often. But maybe we need to take a closer look at our communities. We'll learn more about that in a bit, so don't go anywhere.
A lot of people would say, people want to join gangs because they want to belong, right? And so I would flip that question, and I think it's kind of relevant to our discussion today. I would flip that question by saying, what is it about your community that makes young people or other people feel like they don't belong? And so think about that, right? Because then the onus is not just on the individual. What are we doing as a community to make people feel like they don't belong? And, perhaps you could flip that question by saying, if we're talking about people carrying weapons, and any type of weapons, knives, in this case, bear spray, what is it as a community that we're doing to make young people or, not feel safe in the community in which they live? And there's probably a variety of different reasons for that. If they're selling drugs, they don't want to be ripped off. If they're in a gang and they're walking by themselves and another rival gang comes, they don't want to be in a situation where their life's on the line, right? But we're just not talking about individuals who are involved in gangs or sell drugs that are carrying bear spray. We're talking about, I know other youth that are not involved in that lifestyle, but they feel that they need to carry it for protection.
And I guess that's the question: is why do they also feel like they need that protection?
Yeah, and I think if there is an attraction on why one leans to kind of bear spray, when you spray, you can spray from a far distance. So it gives you time to spray and perhaps take off, right? Versus, carrying a knife or some other weapon that you have to be in close. I've been in the exhibition taking my kids I remember a couple of years ago when I went to the exhibition, we're there to go on rides. And, 5 feet from me, this one individual runs up and sprays another person. But we were probably like 10 feet away, but we could see the mist. And like I said, these are events where we're just I was there to take my kids to go on rides.
What was that like, Stan?
Yeah, you know what? I think, like for me at that time, I had been in situations where I've seen young people get sprayed. Like my first time was, in a school setting when a young person got sprayed. It's all hectic. People are running everywhere. We're thinking, do we pour milk? So we're trying to pour milk on the person's eyes, getting water. It is kind of scary. But then when you are exposed to it enough times, unfortunately, you become desensitized to it. So when I saw the exhibition, we just kind of I just, carried on.
Here's the thing. Mohammed, you are onto something with this question. A lot of people are trying to understand what's going on here. Police are. And so is the Provincial Justice Minister, Bronwyn Eyre.
Well, I think that it's important to emphasize that this is about bear spray in public urban spaces. And, generally, there are very few bears in public urban spaces, and we have seen thousands of bear spray incidents in those spaces across Saskatchewan in the last few years. Thousands. Yes, I suppose there are some instances where it can be used defensively, but bear spray is perhaps not the ideal defensive weapon, let's call it. There are lower concentration products which are not covered by these provincial regulations. Bear spray is very dangerous, and it is a weapon. And when you use bear spray, it's generally, in most of the cases that we are seeing in this province, it is not being used defensively. It is being used offensively, and it is a public safety issue.
When Minister Eyre says there's other tools of protection with a lower concentration, she means something like pepper spray. You are allowed to carry that in a public urban space. They tend to be smaller canisters, and they cause less damage. But as you heard from the minister, bear spray is different. And that's why she says police were calling on the government to crack down on this. So in March, it introduced new regulations that target people carrying bear spray in urban settings. So like a mall or at a big event where it's obvious to police you aren't carrying it to protect yourself from bears. People can face a fine up to $100,000.
If you have bear spray on you in a mall or at the exhibition or at the Brant Center or in a public pool, it's unlikely going to be a hunting or hiking safety situation. So the rules that we have extended, the regulations that this now covers, would enable the police to seize if someone is in possession of bear spray, and the criminal code covers the actual use of bear spray. So it really is an additional tool for law enforcement, which they have been calling for. They have told us that they are dealing with bear spray incidents every day, and that they are creating fear, obviously diminishing public safety. They lead to injuries. They disrupt the day-to-day operations of businesses and public events and facilities across our province. And so it really is about an additional tool for law enforcement, where you have individuals carrying bear spray in locations where bear spray is not necessary.
Stan's not sure this will stop people from carrying spray.
Having a law that's really punitive in its approach doesn't stop people from using spray. And so in the past, they used to have like mandatory minimums on guns. If you're caught with a gun, you're going to have X amount of time. And I don't know if that's the approach for spray, but I just know from my experience, people living the lifestyle, if they're doing 10 years, if they're doing 8, what's another year they think in their mind, right? And then they get back out and they pick up the spray again. And so, and I think best practice have shown that punitive measures don't work.
To buy bear spray in Saskatchewan, you have to present photo ID. The store keeps a record of your name and your address. In Manitoba, retailers go one step further now by recording the serial number on the bear spray canister if 2 or more are purchased. Now, police have told CBC in the past criminals buy it, but they also steal it, and sometimes they order it online. Chris says it's just way too easy for people to get their hands on bear spray.
If they don't want it on the streets, they got to make it harder to get it. Like maybe a little bit more info, and because it was pretty easy for me when I was younger to get that stuff.
Mohammed, what do you think of all of this?
There's a very big possibility that it could happen to anyone, not just gang members. Like if you're in an open setting, it can happen. So, and there's proof of that.
We're talking about bear spray and the number of incidents that we're seeing in urban places, so malls, at schools, at a recent powwow. And we've got a few people who are joining us right now to share their perspective. So let's start with Stephen Wyatt. He's a Regina police officer who also teaches justice studies at Sask Polytech. Steve, welcome to Blue Sky.
Thanks for having me.
As you listen to that audio piece, I'm wondering how much of it resonates with you and what you see as a police officer.
Yeah, certainly a lot of the folks you had on there are saying things that I've heard before. In policing, certainly we recognize bear spray has been a problem, not just in Regina, but other areas as well, including Saskatoon and Prince Albert, to name a few. Bear spray is a fairly unique weapon in the sense that it's quite easy to obtain, as you heard. It's quite easy to conceal as well when we compare it to other weapons, let's say, such as a long gun or something similar to that. Folks possessing bear spray are also altering or defacing the product to conceal what really is inside that canister, again, making it very dangerous to the public.
How does this complicate things for police officers? How difficult is it to police when that is the weapon of choice for a lot of folks?
Yeah, it certainly is not the easiest thing to police when it's so easy to conceal and so readily available. One thing we are focusing on with our students at Sask Polytech is teaching criminal investigations as well as interviewing techniques. And so for our students who go out into the world of policing, being able to conduct a thorough criminal investigation, which would involve interviewing these folks that are arrested or charged possessing bear spray. Hopefully we can get to the bottom of where these products are coming from, where they're getting them from, and increase public safety that way.
What other questions would you ask them?
I guess if we look a little bit deeper, I think the approach here has to be a multifaceted approach, in the sense that legislation is a very important piece of this, but also what sociological conditions exist that are making folks fear for their safety or feel they need to possess bear spray in order to protect themselves. And so I think we have to approach this from a multifaceted mindset. Certainly the new provincial legislation is certainly a step in the right direction and an extra tool in policing is something that we welcome.
Tell me more about that. What is this tool? What does it enable police to do?
Yeah, so the new provincial legislation essentially prohibits bringing bear spray to a public urban setting, such as a swimming pool or a shopping mall or a powwow or something like that, where the chances of encountering bears is very small. And so folks who are bringing bear spray to these public urban settings have a different reason for doing that. And so this legislation will allow police to proactively take enforcement against folks who are simply possessing this product in those settings.
How difficult, though, would it be to pinpoint someone who's got it? Like you said, it's easy to conceal. So what scenario do you imagine where police could actually use this as a tool? How would you know that someone's carrying it? And then how would you go about talking to them and finding out why they've got it and then perhaps fining them?
Yeah, and I don't think there's a blanket way to do that. Is certainly unique in that sense. That being said, I think what's critically important is if folks are attending these public events, if you see something that looks maybe a little bit off, say something, and that will allow police to potentially take proactive measures to address the issue before there's an incident.
What do you think of the fine, up to $100,000? We're going to hear from a criminal defense lawyer to get his take on that. But as a police officer, what do you think of that amount?
I think it certainly sends the message that the provincial government is taking this seriously. It's a fairly large amount. So I think that certainly does send a message.
Has it made our city safer, though? What do you think?
I certainly think it has the potential. It's still very early. It's new legislation, and to my knowledge, we have not laid any charges in Regina to this point. And so I think it's too early to definitively say, but certainly an extra tool is not a bad thing. What
do you say to people who might feel a little nervous going to a large public gathering? I mean, the teenagers we talked to spoke about that it kind of ruins the fun. There is that worry that they live with. If they go somewhere, someone might spray it. So what would you say to people who feel a little nervous?
Yeah, and I think it's critically important to listen to those folks who are saying that. In addition to reducing public safety, bear spray also increases, as we heard, the fear of being a victim of crime, which I think is also critically important. So I think to the folks that are feeling nervous, know that police are taking it seriously. Clearly, the provincial government has enacted legislation that I feel is meaningful. And from an education point of view, at Sask Polytech, we are certainly providing our students with information and skill sets that are necessary when they graduate from Sask Polytech to take into, be it the Saskatchewan Police College, when they are out there working in the field of policing.
What else do you think needs to be done to make our communities safer?
And again, I don't think we can necessarily arrest our way out of some of these issues we're having. I think looking at the sociological factors, again, that maybe are making folks fearful when they're out in public would be something that would be necessary to address this problem from different angles.
I appreciate your time today, Steve. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
That is Steve Wyatt, a Regina police officer who also teaches justice studies at Sask Polytech. Now, Brian Pfefferly is a criminal defense lawyer in Saskatoon, and I had a chance to speak with him earlier today.
As of this morning, as I'm coming in, there was an arrest made in the mall area, which I received a call about, which involved weapons offenses in downtown Saskatoon. So this has become a very common issue for a lot of people and an area of concern. And so when this legislation came out, the provincial government was addressing, I think, a concern of citizens. It just didn't come out of nowhere. But our view as Defense Counsel, we're always viewing things very critically. And when we first observed this legislation, there was a couple things that stood out to us. One was that there already exists criminal law that deals with carried and concealed weapons. And And for the most part, individuals that do possess bear spray in a city center would not have a legitimate reason for doing so. And if they're holding it on their person, there would be a very strong presumption that they're holding it for a purpose dangerous to the public, which is an offense under the criminal code, which can permit arrest and detention. The reality is that it's unjustifiable in most circumstances to possess it in a city. It may be different if you're in La Ronge, for example, though, and you're walking and there's more commonly animals around. The totality of the circumstances where we're talking about these targeted incidents, though, are ones where, as defense counsel, we would have a very difficult time justifying why, a group of teenage boys would all be possessing bear spray and gang colors, for example. Like, we're not going to be successful in those circumstances. I don't think this is the intention of the legislation, but it does potentially provide non-criminal avenues to resolve files, though. And that's one of the, if I could say, small positives, that we could have a situation where someone's possessing bear spray or a weapon dangerous to the public, get charged under the criminal code for that, but it permits us to negotiate a non-criminal code charge that can involve other consequences that are non-criminal, that don't carry with it a criminal record.
Like and so that would be the fine.
Exactly.
A fine instead of...
Exactly. And so we could look to other
record.
options. And so the fine up to $100,000 is frankly something that my eyes bugged out a little bit when I saw that number, because we think of other cases where we see those very significant fines. This would be an unusually high fine. And one couldn't imagine many situations where a person who possesses bear spray in an urban setting getting charged that would receive anything more than what would be typical in like an impaired driving case or something like that, which, someone who could be double legal limit pays $2,000, but someone who's got a can of bear spray would pay 50 times, 60 times more than that. It's quite significant. I don't see it being handed out that often.
Is it up to $100,000?
Exactly.
So it would be up to the discretion of the judge to decide the amount?
Yes, exactly. And the Crown prosecution would, obviously advocate for a position. When a judge is imposing a fine, they look at, like they're looking at a jail sentence, they look at what's required to deter or denounce the behavior of the person. And so obviously the higher the fine, the more significant that would be. But the ability to pay is another factor that has to be considered. We don't want people getting fiscal life sentences or akin to that. In fact, if anything, imposing draconian fines on individuals can drive them into other criminal activity. And ultimately what we want is a safer society. And we don't want people going into a life of crime because fines have pushed them into that, for example. That's something that has unquestionably occurred in other cases where there have been these draconian fines handed out to individuals and they've got no option. We saw it a lot with the sex trade workers when they were previously being charged for street work where they were being solicited by individuals, where they were targeting the street workers, which was completely a bizarre way to approach things. But those people that were doing the type of work they were doing primarily out of poverty were getting fines. And it's just like, okay, you're pushing them back on the street even more. It doesn't make a lot of sense. Many of these individuals being single parents and the like. So I do think that our system of justice will not be handing out draconian penalties. It will be something that is judicially considered. The judges will always consider the ability to pay or work off on fine option. And this does create a potential other opportunity for people to negotiate a non-criminal resolution. I don't think, though, that that's likely the purpose of the legislation. I think it's to drive home to the fact, and it does have a public message. I mean, we're talking about it right now. We know now that if you possess bear spray, which I drove around for many, many months with bear spray in my glove box after, cross-country skiing on Ebbs Trail, I'd bring bear spray with me. I, as you could probably tell from my figure, I didn't do a lot of cross-country skiing and Ebbs Trails this year, but that sat in my one vehicle all year. And I think that some of the concerns that are by other people that have called in and you've interviewed will racialize people poor people be targeted by this? Unfortunately, I think yes, they will. And there's two kind of components to that. One is that racial profiling is something that I think as a society we need to understand isn't coming from always a place of like evil, or it's not coming from a place of hatred. Sometimes it's just coming from a place of resources and judicial resources and police resources where they're targeting core areas. Poverty is something that impacts racialized Canadians more than others. So people that are in poverty are more likely to commit certain types of crimes like robberies, thefts, those sorts of things. And it becomes a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy where you over-police the areas that are often in, where there's a lot of racialized people living. So that's always a concern. We don't like to see overreach. Our Defence Lawyers Association was obviously concerned when we first saw this legislation on the $100,000 fine. We tried to be optimistic about it, and we'll be interested to see if this leads to non-criminal code outcomes, which I think would actually be a good thing.
Has it been used yet? Has there been a precedent set? Do we have anybody who's received a fine of a certain amount?
Not to my knowledge. In fact, so I just, knowing I was going to be on the show, I reached out to a couple people, asked just informally and anecdotally who have seen bear spray charges. They are being charged under Section 88 of the criminal code still. So it appears that the criminal code is still the mechanism, which suggests that, like some critics have said, that this is a little bit of an unnecessary piece of legislation because the criminal code always has given the police power to charge in certain circumstances.
So what would make our communities safer? Chris Witchikin talked about making it harder to purchase.
Yeah.
What do you think?
You know, I think those are really difficult questions and so much above the justice system's ability to really address. These are deep-seated issues. It's sort of like the idea of trying to say that, like, preventing handguns will save gun crime, and, you know, ask anybody, defense counsel, like, no, it won't. Like, gun crime is caused by socioeconomic issues. It's caused by other issues. That saying that people always say, you know, guns don't kill people, people kill people, and it's absolutely true, as much as people don't like to hear that. The same thing goes for any of these types of offenses. Why are we concerned about this particular issue? It's because of higher profile incidents where groups of individuals, many of them racialized, I would suggest most of them poor, many of whom do not have structured family upbringings and difficulties with addiction issues in their family, perhaps difficulty at school and the inability of the school system to embrace some of the kids with higher needs. They're going elsewhere. And, you know, these are questions you could ask gang experts and people like that. And that's the people that I think we should lean on as a society to say, like, how do you stop this? Preventing the sale of things, like, it's like in jail. Like, you know, you say, you know, like, lock people up, they'll be safe. Jail is one of the most dangerous places that you can be, and it's not because the people are using their fists. They're using weapons that are the most creative things you've ever seen. So you give someone a toothbrush, they'll make a weapon. I don't think preventing the sale of this particular type of weapon is going to change the type of crime. It might eliminate one or two certain incidents, but it's not going to create the big problem. You know, I always quote my friend Charlie Clark, but he always used to say, we're not going to arrest our way out of these problems. And I think that's fundamentally the case. It also doesn't mean you shouldn't be arresting people that are committing crimes. Our downtowns across North America are all the same. If you travel around, it looks the same everywhere, whether it's, you know, poor people that are doing drugs or committing petty crime. And the interesting thing is I spent a fair bit of time out in the East Coast, which to me gives me an idea of just geographically there's so many similarities. And what stands out to me is that the people that we see in downtown Saskatoon and Regina are primarily Indigenous people and primarily people that are racialized. When I go to the East Coast, I see the exact same thing, but I do not see Indigenous people on the streets. And to me, that just again drives home that this is something that is a poverty issue. It's an issue that addresses core socioeconomic problems. And the focus should be on those big picture issues, education, parents, you know, addiction issues. And these are really, really complex problems. And it's hard to point to one or two people that have failed. It's just like a whole domino effect. And I don't know if there's an easy solution. I mean, North America is seeing this poverty issue and the divide between the rich and the poor. And it's getting bigger. It's not getting smaller. And it's just sad.
That is Brian Pfefferly, who's a criminal defense lawyer in Saskatoon. Well, we do have a gang expert standing by to join us next. Bobby Henry has spent much of his academic career trying to better understand gangs in this city and what draws young people to them. He is an Indigenous Studies assistant professor at the University of Saskatchewan. Bobby, welcome to Blue Sky.
It's a pleasure to be here. Nice to see you again.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground already. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on the perspectives that we've heard so far.
Yeah, I think you've covered a lot of different perspectives, and they're all very interesting in what they're saying, coming at it from different perspectives, but also at a lot of similarities. And this idea of social disparities being at the core root of a lot of the stuff that people are talking about. And when you listen to Brian talk and Stephen speak and Stan and the other individuals from the earlier podcast, there's some things that we're almost glazing over at times. It's like this idea of escalating or anteing up of violence within our streets and within the spaces. And then also the idea of racialization or coding it around issues related, especially within the prairie provinces, related to Indigenous peoples. And the impact that laws like this continue to have on removing Indigenous people from urban spaces, the idea of the hyper-incarceration of Indigenous bodies on the prairies, and what does this do? And so, but again, when we look at the bear spray issue, in that it's just another tool that's being used by individuals to exert power, to try and gain respect and so forth. It's the same thing as when we look in other areas, the use of guns or other tools to try and create this sort of hyper masculine performance that's going on there, that I can actually do this to you. And so that's where I'm kind of looking at and listening to these discussions that are going on. And I kind of agree. Like, the more we try and punitively look at our way to try and get out of this, the more we're trying to actually entrenching ourselves and ignoring the root causes of what is actually happening here within our communities. What is going on, and how do we work our way from here? This isn't to say that we need to stop doing that. Rather, we need to look at where we're putting our resources, and are we actually putting our resources in the best place to increase public safety for everyone? Again, with a lot of this, is the example that Brian gave, that he had it in his vehicle going, well, I'm sure that we're not going to be stopping white, middle-aged, upper-class individuals for bear spray, or even getting charged with it if they're on it. It'll be like, why are you carrying this? Oh, I forgot I was carrying it on me. I was just out skiing. Okay, kid, just remove it. Versus an Indigenous kid who's carrying it on him, and I was just carrying on it because I was walking. We're not going to see the same sort of usage of the law against those bodies. And I think that's something that we need to look at within a lot of this, that it's not black and white, right or wrong. There's an interpretation of intent that people will put into this. And when a police officer comes in, they have that idea of, okay, is this actually going to be an intent that's going to move forward? How can we use this as a surveillance tool to find out more things within this community? These are the questions I have about this. Like, how is this actually going to, how does this make us safer, when the reality is that we've always had group violence within a lot of these spaces before?
I wrote down 3 words that I'm wondering if you can speak to just a little bit more, because it might help us understand and unpack that very first question that set us off on this, right? Like, why are teens picking it up? And I wrote down power, respect, and hyper masculinity. Why do you think that people are seeking those things? Power, respect. Like, what are they not getting that they're getting from carrying around bear spray?
I think it's coming from a whole bunch of different aspects. One is, if you don't feel that you belong, or you're pushed out of a community, or you don't have power or voice within a community, you're going to try and get your power in some other way. This is where we see individuals who are bullied create a hyper violence in order to get power back, or to enact this violence onto others that are within those communities. So if we're not finding spaces where individuals feel they belong, that they don't feel like they have a positive relationship, and they don't feel that they're being listened to, why would I care about anything else in that community? You don't care about me. Why do I care about you? How do we get power? And like, that's just it. It's just where we're going with a lot of this sort of stuff. And I think we see it a lot in multimedia So we look at online presences and how individuals are utilizing, like, let's just use Instagram and TikTok and these other sort of media places. How are they utilizing imagery in order to show power over others? Sometimes they show weapons on there. Sometimes now they're putting down, you see the cans of bear mace and everything else being put down, that individuals will carry it or they have the potential to carry it. When we look at this idea of hyper masculinity, I think what we're seeing is we're also seeing the idea that when you carry a knife, like, I don't think a lot of these kids they may want to try and get power and use violence against individuals, but they don't want to take somebody's life. And I think there's a perception around bear spray that I can harm you, injure you, and take something from you, but I'm not taking your life. Whereas if I have a knife or a gun, I have to utilize the tool, the way it was meant to be used. And that can maim and injure and kill somebody. And I don't think individuals are at that space with a lot of this. And that's why we're seeing more of an uptake in this. That individuals want to be able to get power or control or protect oneself, but they don't want to have to actually cause really what they believe is really physical harm, even though individuals can be really physically harmed by bear spray.
Wow. That's a really interesting perspective. And Stan did talk about that too, that for some people it creates that space that you actually don't have to get in an altercation that involves a knife. You've got some space between you and the other person. I do wonder about the wider community in the meantime, right? And like those teenagers off the top that feel worried going places. Hearing Brian Pfefferly talk about something that happened at the mall, which is just a few blocks from where I am, and I'll probably walk there later. And so people are trying to figure out how to navigate in these spaces where there might be this perception of risk. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are on how we navigate this in the wider community.
I don't, until we actually start addressing and like root causes of violence, like, we're always going to be asserting, like, what is the risk that we're having in here? I like, for yourself walking to the mall, you're also taking on different risks and thinking about it differently than if I was walking to the mall, because our bodies are different as a male body and a female body, right? You're also assessing different risks going to the mall because of potential violence against gender violence that we see in our community. Like, more women are assaulted than men. Our bodies are, and so this is the other part too. So we also have to understand that a body also holds different power, and that also assesses our risk going here. So to say that everybody is thinking about risk going there, it's not the same. And I know I'm talking in circles, but what I'm trying to say is that when we look at this as a community, the majority of people going to the mall will never actually be assaulted or attacked in any which way because their body is actually protected. When we look at this, individuals who are visibly Indigenous or look as though they don't have a socioeconomic standing, they're at higher risk of violence against them because of a whole bunch of other factors that I don't think we can actually look at in this podcast or anything else, but that really need to get looked at. As Stan was saying, when he was at the X there, it was sprayed, but it wasn't sprayed at him, but he got impacted by it because he knows that he's not going to be, the spray is not designed for him. It's not designed to go against you. It's not designed to go against Stephen, myself, Brian Pfefferly. It's designed to go against specific individuals that an individual may have heightened fear against. And that's what we kind of need to look at and work at, is how do we actually begin to mitigate this idea of fear? How do we begin to build relationships, positive relationships in the community? And how do we work with, well, we can say youth and we can say young adults and so forth, to figure out ways that we don't use hyper violence in these spaces and find other ways in which to do this. Like, violence isn't going away tomorrow, but we can't police our way out of it. We can't arrest our way out of it, and we can't fine our way out of it. We got to find a different way in which to start looking at this, because again, if you have a fine and you can't, who that is carrying bear spray and gets out, and say you do get $100,000 fine, what individual who carries bear spray right now, and that's what I'd like to know if we want to collect statistics, who are the individuals being arrested or charged with carrying bear spray? What is the demographics of that? And make that open to the public on who you're looking at, because that will also start looking at why would a fine even make a damn bit of difference in anything that's going on? It's not.
Yeah, I have one last question for you because we're going to wrap up. But I because you're so in this, right, as an academic, and I know you know this stuff, I'm just curious what gives you some hope on this topic, because I don't want to leave people feeling scared or just hopeless. So where do you find some hope when you look at the issues?
I think you're hearing it from the youth that were at the beginning of the first podcast that you played for everybody. I think that having youth engaged in talking about this issue, having individuals who are actually concerned about what's happening, and providing space for individuals to talk about this and building relationships and actually ask the hard questions. What is it that we need in our communities to make ourselves feel safe? And ask really hard questions is having more police officers in the community, does it make it safer? If not, then what are the other, as Stephen was saying, what are the other socio-political realities that, or what are the social determinants that deter people from committing the crime that we're afraid of people committing? Because crime is committed at all socioeconomic levels, but we're really focused on the sort of individualized crime where individuals can hurt one another, and we're kind of ignoring green crime, white collar crime, and so forth. So how do we start looking at that, and how do we understand these social political realities that people are living in, that they're just trying to survive? And once we can start looking at that, I think, and answering that honestly, that's when we can start moving in a positive direction as a community.
I so appreciate having this conversation today, Bobby. Thank you for being part of it.
Thank you.
That is Bobby Henry, an Indigenous Studies assistant professor at the University of Saskatchewan. You can hear that podcast, that question that came to us from Muhammad Mustafa is what was the focus of our podcast this week for Good Questions Saskatchewan. So we played some of that at the start of the show, but if you missed it, you can find it on CBC Listen or wherever you get your podcasts, and be sure to share it with a friend as well. I'm Leisha Grabinski. You've been listening to us today on CBC Radio 1, 540 AM across the province, 94.1 FM in Saskatoon, and 102.5 FM in Regina.